we're going to cover monitoring performance for supplier diversity programs. Task is track and monitor performance towards goals for sustainability and social responsibility throughout the supply chain. Goal setting. We've been through this on a few of the other modules, but it's a good review. Integrating individual and business goals and objectives with relevant measurements will ensure the ability to track and report progress. So internal goals, the establishment of quantifiable goals and the ability to measure progress towards them with KPIs or key performance indicators is critical. Otherwise, you don't know how you're doing. Multi-tier supplier goals, so we need goals down to tier 2 suppliers, tier 3 suppliers. It's important to not only establish and measure internal goals, but also goals pertaining to suppliers. Relevant social responsibility goals include, for example, the amount of spend allocated to diverse suppliers. Then you got to get some metrics so you can measure the KPIs. What gets measured gets done. So internal goals, those that track the spend with diverse suppliers where the data is used for internal management reporting. You got to make SMART goals, otherwise they're hard to accomplish. So SMART's specific, measurable, attainable, results-oriented, and time-bound. That's ISM's version of SMART. So supply management professionals must recognize the differences in strategic or operational goals. So strategic is usually 5 years or more. Operational goals usually 1 to 5 years, and tactical goals are less than a year. Amounts of employee input, level of goal difficulty, and qualitative versus quantitative goals. So measure with numbers, opinions. Effective goals. To be effective, goals must be measurable and should be aligned vertically and horizontally with key corporate objectives, individual performance objectives, business unit objectives, and functional unit objectives. They need to also be comprehensive to measures cover all areas that supply management can impact in these programs. And dynamic and aggressive, adjusted regularly for changes in priorities, transparent, broadly communicated to ensure that they are used to drive decision-making and tied to incentive compensation. So it's tied to meaningful performance-based incentives. That's the way to really get people to pay attention. Backed with resources, supported by resources to set meaningful targets, and championed by strong leadership. So multi-tier supplier goals, often driven by various laws and regulations, involve specific formats for record keeping if you're a government customer. Final customers may also want reporting on the use of diverse suppliers. Creation of measurements. The supply management professional must create, report, achieve, evaluate, and revise the organizational metrics that will achieve the corporate objectives for the supplier diversity program. And management needs to put into place a system that ensures the processes are controlled in compliance per SOX regulations. So monitoring performance. The following measures are used to help ensure supplier diversity program performance. Auditing, number 1, used to determine if the systems in place work. So you have internal audit, which is performed by company employees with no stake in the outcome, usually by an internal audit group in a large company. It's also an ISO requirement. So, and you also have self-inspection, another form of internal audit where those in the supply management function inspect their own processes. And then you got peer inspection too. External audits, usually performed by ISO or auditors or EPA, somebody like that. And the supply chain. When auditing the supply chain, what standard to use is an issue. Some standards are company policies and procedures, or organization policies and procedures, contract requirements, regulatory requirements, if any, ISO requirements, if any. So the better of the four would be regulatory and ISO requirements because those are, you got to meet those. Policies, you can enforce that. Reporting, self-audits followed by voluntary disclosure to government regulators along with self-correction serve to reduce penalties against a company. But the worst position for a company is to be in a repetitive or ongoing violation that never gets fixed. Validation process implies that the solution or process is correct or compliant with a set standard or rules, usually compliant with a policy. Means it will meet the needs of the user. Reporting requirements. Organizations must establish a management reporting system that will ensure that the measurements and processes are tracked for compliance and accuracy. That's a SOX requirement. Remediation. If a process deficiency is found, then a process improvement plan should be established. That's called remediation. Often a written action plan necessary that includes monitoring, training on policies and procedures should extend beyond supply management. And organizations should establish a system of continuous improvement. And then review. The purpose of an audit is to gauge compliance. Compliance with what? Are you going to have them comply with your policies, your procedures, contract requirements? Obviously, you'll have to have them comply with regulatory or ISO requirements if there are any. The following questions should be answered before an audit team begins its work. Who will see the results? Those who work in the areas being audited, management, individuals outside supply management. Who's going to review these? What will be done with the results? Will it be used for performance evaluation, corrective action, improved training? Who will be permitted to make changes based on the audit results, and what will be done with the audit report? Will it be filed, be used to track improvements? And then diverse supplier programs need visible metrics on actual to goal results. Determine what categories and levels of diverse supplier participation in the organization is attained, and then accountability. Look internally at how well the organization identifies and uses diverse suppliers, and look externally to gauge how well the existing diverse suppliers are performing in comparison to the non-diverse suppliers. And then there's something called the triple bottom line. Organizations are incorporating sustainability and social responsibility into their business strategies to achieve a competitive advantage. So the triple bottom line is economic prosperity issues are reported with environmental quality issues and social equality issues. So you have economic, which is the income statement. And then you also, along with it, report on environmental quality and social equity issues. That's the triple bottom line. Organizations are now looking to their supply chain to help in achieving their sustainability objectives. And supply management professionals must communicate their organization's sustainability objectives and provide the supply base with updates. Then you've got certifications. ISO 14000 is the EMS, or Environmental Management System. It's a family of standards provide practical tools for companies and organizations of all kinds looking to manage environmental responsibilities. So 14001, latest one I've seen is 2015, sets out criteria for the EMS and can be certified too. So you certify to 1401. 1404 provides guidance for an organization on the establishment of the EMS. And 1405 provides guidance for mostly small and medium-sized enterprises on implementation of an EMS. 1406 is intended to be used for those organizations that implemented an EMS, but can help other organizations in integrating eco design, so like your supply base. 14064 specifies principles and requirements, the organization level for reporting of greenhouse gas emissions and removals. If you don't have that as a requirement, you don't need 14064. And then 2600 or 26,000 rather provides guidance on how organizations can operate in a socially responsible way. It means acting in an ethical and transparent way that contributes to the health and welfare of society. So that's an interesting one to get certified on. ISO standards require ongoing internal audits along with external audits every 6 to 9 months. A corrective action plan process is also needed to meet compliance, otherwise known as a CAR, corrective action report. Purchase of recycled materials in the minimization of waste. In addition to implementing their own internal programs for use of materials, companies can also include as part of their environmental management system a goal of purchasing recycled materials. Companies may also require a supplier certificate of recycled materials. So minimization of waste. So 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. And then there's cradle to cradle designing, which the product is designed to break down into technical or biological nutrients at the end of its useful life. So cradle to grave means the product gets disposed of properly, but can't be reused. Cradle to cradle means you can reuse the biological or technical nutrient somewhere else. So zero waste concept, all discarded materials are designed to become resources for others to use, cradle to cradle designs. Eliminates all discharges to land, water, and air that may be harmful. And waste from electrical and electronic equipment. The EU directive sets collection, recycling, and recovery targets for electrical goods that make producers responsible for financing and elimination of hazardous waste. The nice thing about this law in Europe is the liability is perpetual and never ends. Once you create it, you own it, even after it gets put somewhere. Disposal considerations. Prior to the end of the life cycle, purchasing should be seeking disposal options for waste. These options must be legal. And sell to another organization. The organization may use waste and byproducts elsewhere in the organization, sell them to another organization, use scrap brokers, dispose of materials by some legal means, or destroy the waste and byproducts. And here's an ISM survey from 2019 on sustainability issues. Supply management view of sustainability. Table of contents. It's about a dozen pages long. I was working with Boise paper. And there you have it. End of life cycle. So disposal options prior to the end of life cycle purchasing should be seeking disposal options for waste. These options must be legal. Sell to another organization. The organization may use the waste and byproducts elsewhere in the organization to sell them to another organization. Scrapbrokers or dispose of the materials by some legal means or destroy the waste or byproducts. So a supply manager should do all of the following when buying hazardous materials, except what would he not do? Locate a legal permitted supplier. Well, he's going to do that. Evaluate supplier qualifications and can do that. Write safety data sheets. I don't think he's going to do that. And review safety practices. Supplier plans going to do that. So they'll use safety data sheets, but they won't write them. That's done by the supplier. Yeah. One more here. Which of the following statements is true regarding the proper handling of regulated materials from initial acquisition through final disposition? Liability follows ownership of hazardous waste even after disposal. That's true. The buyer's insurance carrier should be placed first on the certificate of insurance. I think that's true. Laws and standards of the contractor's country shall govern its work. Yeah. Shipment across national borders has been simplified by globalization. Which of the following statements is true? I wonder if that's supposed to be not true, because this is not true. And the rest of the three of them are. Well, let's see here. A, liability follows ownership. In case of regulated hazardous material, liability follow ownership and anything that connects hazardous people to their owners. Yeah, B is not correct. Insurance will take priority, should be part of the contractual negotiation. And geez. In general, the stricter laws, whether the buyer's or supplier's country are recommended, they will be more likely to pass. No. So that's kind of a goofy question, but it is what it is. Here's a summary. As best practice, a best practice is to use tools for measuring and monitoring supplier sustainability and social responsibility performance. In the development and implementation of metrics and performance criteria is a critical best practice to the success of sustainability and social responsibility initiatives. And a crucial step in auditing the supply chain is determining the standard to be used. The purpose of an audit is to gauge compliance to a set standard. So you got to know what standard is. All right, let's go look at some questions here. L3. All right, how many we got? Ooh, 13 of them. Okay. Well, start working through them. We'll go over answers in a few minutes. Get some answers here. All right. Number 1 is Bravo. 2 is also Bravo. 3 is Delta. 4 is Alpha. 5 is Charlie. 6 is Bravo. 7 is also Bravo. 8 is Charlie. 9 is also Charlie. 10 is Bravo. And 11 is Bravo, is Charlie. 12 is Bravo. And 13 is Alpha. All right, that concludes L3. We'll work on L4 next.